All right. Good morning, good evening. Welcome to the May edition of the Agones Community Call. We have lots, not lots, but good solid amount on the agenda. Do we have anybody that's new joining us today that wants to at least say hi, or we're not going to put you on the spot too much?
Yeah, it's my first time joining this meeting. I'm Daniel, by the way.
Welcome.
Thanks for inviting.
Absolutely.
Hello, it's my first time as well.
So yeah, if you have any
Here.
questions or anything that you want to, get to know more about the project, this is the place. So we're happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody have any other kind of general announcements or anything they want to share? All right, then we'll dive into Mark with release 1.6.0.
Woot. So 1.6.0 went out. I think looking at everyone's faces here,
We're
everyone knows what's
talking,
in
but
here.
we don't hear you, or at least I don't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I hear Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. Is that better? Technology, how does it even work? 1.6.0 went out last Tuesday. Woo, which is cool. There is a lot of stuff in this. It was actually a really big release, which was cool. Actually, I'm going to bring up the full change log. So, I'm going to do this. Present a Chrome tab. Change log. Share. There was lots of cool stuff in this. Probably worth noting some breaking changes with some of our beta and alpha stuff, like the multi-cluster allocation. So multi-cluster allocation, some of the things got named. So post-allocate went to allocate. The API surface is now in stable. I don't know if Pune wants to talk about this at all. Although we might change some of the installation steps and some of the other things around process to see if we can make that a little bit easier for some things. Pune's nodding. Cool. Sweet. Other things, if you're using the Node.js SDK, thanks to Stephen for the work on switching that to gRPGs. Let us know if that causes any issues. There was that previous issue we had around long-running gRPC, that connection with Node.js. Hopefully this solves it. If it doesn't, yes, definitely let us know. Lots and lots and lots of enhancements. Big one for me is all the player tracking stuff. So that's under an alpha feature flag. So if you want to track which players are connected or disconnected, or how many players you have, or any of that kind of stuff, please enable that feature and take it for a test run. We'd definitely love feedback, see if there are any bugs, any performance issues, anything like that, just to see how it works and that it does the things that we hope it does. Anything else that's of note? Kubernetes 1.15, so we moved everything up to 1.15 now. You will also note, as of the last request, we've changed, I think it was this one, or was it the last one? I think it was the last one. We changed it so that the N-1 for the Kubernetes version was only for the majority of Kubernetes versions supported across all cloud providers. So if 2 out of the 3, so AKS, EKS, or GKE, have support for N-1 that's ahead of ours, then we will upgrade it as long as it's supported on all 3. So it means we can be a bit more aggressive with our upgrades. Anything else particularly noteworthy? I'm just trying to have a look.
Just to talk about upgrades, we've been on a cadence recently of every other release of ours, we pick up a new Kubernetes version. Which makes sense because we release exactly twice as fast as Kubernetes. So that means we're now keeping up. I think the next Kubernetes release got delayed due to the COVID situation, and they're slowing down their release cadence. So I think we may not keep that cadence up. So there may be a couple of releases before we move to 1.16.
Yeah.
But I think if things were all normal, then that feels like about the right speed at which we should upgrade to stay sort of current, if you will, with the Kubernetes releases.
I mean, I will also say, as to your point previously, Robert, in previous meetings, this also means that we're not just skirting that edge of supported Kubernetes versions on platforms, especially on GK, it's a Google project. But So that makes me feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, I think AKS was actually the thing that was pushing a little bit
Yeah.
further ahead, where they were looking like they were going to drop support before GKE for the I think the only version we supported, which was a little scary. So
that would be less than ideal. Outside of that, I don't think there's anything else that was major. We upgraded our consensus, things like that. So I think that unless there's anything else that anyone else wants to highlight, I think that covers it for release 1.6.0.
Just a question on the player tracking. So is this, you've updated the REST API for that, but I guess it's not implemented into each SDK yet?
That is yes. I did REST, Go because it's for our testing. REST actually because of surveys, that's the one people use the most, which is interesting. Yeah, then if you have time and inclination to work on the SDK for a particular language, please do. Yes, that is a good point.
Rearrange.
We have a lot of SDKs now, and keeping them all up to date is like a lot of work. So we definitely rely on the community a lot now. You'll note, I don't know if it's of at all interest, but the alpha, and if you haven't looked, the alpha and beta SDKs have their own protos and swaggos, so they're actually completely separate. You can, for pretty much all the languages, you can point that they're all served through the same API endpoint, but they just have separate protos, so you have to generate them separately. There's an example of that in the Go stuff and the Swagger stuff if you need to do that. Also, you don't want me writing Node. Like, that's not something you want. That's a bad idea.
So straightforward now with the gRPC client.
Woot. That's good. You say straightforward, but you've seemed like you don't want me writing JavaScript.
One thought about that, Mark, is you mentioned we have lots of different SDKs, many of which are primarily not maintained by you and are sort of shared around the community. Going forward, as we're implementing new features like this with player tracking, where we are changing SDK, I think it would be nice if we had a way to sort of let people know, like, hey, like, I know, I think you may have, I clearly got this from you, but I don't know if everybody else did. Like, I'm really pushing to get player tracking in for 1.6. Like, if other SDK sort of maintainers, if you will, sort of understood that you were pushing for that, like, so they could also like maybe slide their PRs in beforehand instead of hearing at this meeting, like, by the way, this is in the release, but not in your SDK.
Yep.
I don't know if we have a good way to capture, like, I think Kubernetes uses like owners files, right? Which work with Prow, which we're not completely using yet. But if we sort of captured, like, here are some of the primary maintainers for each SDK, that we could sort of ping those people or create issues to let those people know that a new feature is coming that requires SDK support in case they want to jump on it for a release.
Do you have suggestions on how we should do that?
Well, I mean, I think issues is probably the easiest way, right? So, like, if we know who to notify, like, if
just
you
make sure
we
ping the people.
Hey, we should add the player tracking support to the Node.js SDK. CC Stephen, like, if you have time, like, and this is something you're interested in. This is something you should be aware of ahead of time instead of sort of post facto.
That's a good idea. That seems like a nice simple way of doing it. Like, I can probably do the Rust stuff because I've been active in Rust recently and stuff as well, and I know there's a lot of Rust users in our community. No, that's a good idea. Let me make an action item to actually do that, and I'll put those on the ticket. Add that to myself. CCN relevant.
Yeah, I don't know process-wise. It's easier to create like one master tracking ticket with a bunch of checkboxes. So we can track in one place. Like, here's where it is implemented. Here's where it's missing. Because as we also talk about graduation to GA and beta, like, it seems like we shouldn't graduate something to GA certainly without supporting all the SDKs. Beta would be an open question of, like, is it a majority? Is it all of them implemented before we graduate to beta? I think alpha it's okay to start alpha without all of them, but before we say it's final, like, it needs to be everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, that was sort of a question I was going to ask too on the player tracking stuff. Like, at what point do we close that ticket as done? And I think that's that's maybe we also put a note on that ticket saying, hey, it's released as alpha, and then we can also put a note on it saying, hey, it's released as beta, and like so we can track that through. I like that idea a lot. I would just do the work. I like that a lot. Do we have owner files for SDKs? The reason I ask that more than anything else is like I kind of have a mental map of like who does what generally. Like I know Stephen usually does the Node.js stuff and whatnot, but like my memory's only so good. I don't know if we want to go down that path. I'm just thinking more for like if one of us is working on a feature and like they want to go look up who those people are, probably useful.
We do for at least some of them. So I see. I think this was partly put in place to get the right people on review automatically. So Dev JGM is listed as an owners for C++.
Oh yeah, so
Steven is listed as owners for Node.js, both for the examples and for the SDK. I think those are the only two that have owners. So a couple of them have owners, but the other ones, it would be nice, even if those owners are the same people that are in the top level owners files, just so it was obvious like who the primary maintainers for. Yeah. Because those are pretty big and different parts of the code tree, right? Like if you think about like there's a whole bunch of like the controllers and everything where you say like, okay, like I have a project maintainer, like I kind of own all this stuff, but then there's always like different languages and sort of the sort of weirder 100%. Parts. And so calling that out, I think would be a nice thing to add.
I'm gonna literally do this now. Don't forget. I like it.
Robbie, do you want to talk about upgrades?
The next one, yeah. So I stuck this on here. Eric had actually sort of pinged this ticket a couple of days ago, and I thought this would be a good forum to discuss it. Quite a while back, I created a ticket to create a proposal for creating an Agones operator. So right now, sort of the lifecycle management for Agones is you install via Helm or YAML, and then Mark wrote up some upgrade instructions about how you get from version A to version A+1. And you can run Helm upgrade. You can sort of delete everything manually and reapply install.yaml. In either case, there is the recommended process of draining your cluster from active workloads. So effectively, if you look at sort of the manual steps in the upgrade documentation, one question would be is whether we should try to automate that with something like an operator, right? So you take those steps, you encode them in code and software, and then that sort of takes the uncertainty away from people and it becomes something you can test. And so that was sort of the idea behind the operator was like, could we write some software that would help people through the upgrade process? Now, if you step back and look at the upgrade process, the recommended upgrade process is actually like create a new cluster, do a red-green deployment, move to the new cluster. And part of the reason for that is that then you aren't having to deal with in-place upgrades, which can be rather tricky. And if you're doing in-place upgrades and part of that procedure is to drain all of your workload anyway, like unless you have planned downtime for your game, which a lot of modern games are trying to avoid, then you have to have a second cluster anyway. So is it just as easy to have a second cluster and do a red, green and move over as it is to have a second cluster, drain the first cluster and undrain the first cluster? That's kind of an open question. So we kind of let this issue on hold as that was the recommended upgrade procedure. As the product matures, I think it becomes maybe more interesting to go back and talk about what an in-place upgrade might look like, possibly without having to drain your cluster. And I think that's where the operator would be useful. So my initial sort of thinking behind the operator was maybe we could get rid of Helm and use the operator for installation and upgrades. Another idea which Eric put in the ticket was have a way to wrap Helm and use something like the Helm operator so that we keep Helm, so people want to use Helm can do that, and the operator sort of automates the things you would do with Helm. I think the one thing I'd like to hear from folks here is, do people like Helm? Do people want to keep using Helm? Do people think that in-place upgrades are something that's important, or are people okay or comfortable with the use a new cluster sort of upgrade strategy? So Eric, I don't know if you want to say anything also, since this piqued your interest recently and sort of where you're coming from.
Can I throw one more thing into the mix real quick? Would Helm 3, moving to Helm 3, solve some of these issues? There you go. That's it. I'm done.
Okay, I cannot answer that question. As far as wrapping the using the Helm operator, I think it works okay for a minor version upgrade. I don't know enough about operators if upgrading a major version is something that is supposed to be supported. If we want to support that use case, the current operator SDK Helm wrapping wouldn't work. And it also doesn't deal with in-place migration of CRDs. So if we need to do that, I know CRD supports some of those updates, but then again, I'm not entirely sure if it does upgrade what is already in the cluster. I'd be happy to have more knowledge on that topic.
I guess my question is also like, we're talking about operator. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, what's kind of like a critical user journey that we would want this operator to do? Because I mean, like, it seems like there's also a bit of a zeitgeist around the community of Kubernetes of like having command line tools as well, rather than necessarily operators. And having that being a thing, if we went like with a command line tool that was also useful as a library, say, for example, so you could use it both from like, say, a Go library as well as from, something like that. So then we could maybe do Terraform providers or something like that. Does that start to solve some of the same issues? I don't know. I'm asking that question. That's why I sort of like, when I come back to like, what's the thing that we need? What's the pain points? What's the thing that you want to be able to do really easily?
Yeah. So when I first filed the ticket, that's what I was trying to get at. Was I thought that the main pain points were installation and in-place upgrades.
Yeah.
And I think, having worked on the project for a while now, like I'm not hearing a lot of people complaining about installation, right? It seems like install.yaml is like the quick and easy get stuff up and running installation. And if you want to have a little bit more control, then Helm seems to work okay. It seems to work, well enough, and is configurable enough. And because of the complexity of doing in-place upgrades, with especially things like CRD versions changing, like how do you upgrade from 1.5 to 1.6 when we've changed the alpha CRDs for allocation, right? Like, that's non-trivial. And then you're also sort of dealing with, especially like if you can upgrade like 1.5 to 1.6 with, now you have a new Kubernetes version. So we're kind of telling you want a new cluster anyway, because you either doing an in-place upgrade of Kubernetes and an in-place upgrade of Agones and trying to synchronize those, or you just create a new cluster with all the new stuff and kind of move to that. And so that's kind of what I was trying to start with. Was it felt like there was sort of two critical user journeys that I identified initially that the operator pattern seems to solve. And I'm not sure either of those are necessarily critical to this customer, this audience, right? And that's what I was trying to get, is like, are those things that people are having pain points with right now, or are those things that we're sort of sidestepping through process and best practices where it's not important to code those things in software?
Yeah, so for us, we do maintain 2 clusters, and we will drain one cluster down to 0 to do our Agones updates. But yeah, we've considered the more like the blue-green style system as well, just of having a temporary second cluster. But yeah, I think on the surface it seems like in-place upgrades would be valuable, but then there is this kind of the Kubernetes upgrade thing as well. You've got to make sure the game will still stay up while that's happening. So it's it's all about uptime for us.
One thing as well for against maybe doing blue-green is scale. We have some games that we have upwards of 10,000 game servers. So doing a blue-green is you need to provision a second cluster with basically your peak CCU.
Would you do maybe more of a rolling sort of deploy in that sort of scenario, where you'd like bring up one, take down one, bring up one, take down one, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think that'd be the best.
Yeah, which would still fit with our current upgrade pattern anyway.
And it's actually probably recommended in terms of best practice anyway, because then what you can do is you create the new one with small capacity, you canary test, you validate everything's working. You've presumably done all of your internal smoke tests, but you validate everything's working with real traffic as a canary. And then you sort of slowly move stuff over, and you can easily roll forward or backwards, sort of based on percentage allocations across the two, until you're comfortable. And as you're doing that, you can either manually or using Kubernetes autoscaler sort of adjust the number of nodes in each cluster so that your total capacity is approximately peak capacity plus a little bit of surge capacity during the migration, and not have 2x your sort of number of CPUs or your spend during the upgrade process, right? And given that Agones releases every 6 weeks, this upgrade process is going to be something that's going to happen frequently. And so, like, I think that's the other idea with the operator is, if this is happening all the time, it's something we're going to want, or people are going to want to automate to some degree, right? So the question is, like, at what level do we provide automation? Because we don't want people to stop upgrading because it's too hard, right? That's the most important thing is, we are not backporting a lot of bug fixes. We very rarely go back and release patch versions on old releases. We're fixing stuff ahead and asking people to upgrade. So we want people to upgrade. We don't want that to be prohibitively difficult to do.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to tackle soon is probably upgrading us to Helm 3. It seems like everything works on Helm 3, but I'd like to move like all our developer tools and make that a tested path and write docs for that, because I think minorly there's a small like command line change, and I don't think anything else really changes for that, but the install steps make like a lot easier. Like there's no tiller, and that might solve some issues. And then we could look at some other options based on that. It looks like a lot of, I actually did some digging into some of the command line tools. I actually think that's really cool, just because there's a user experience. A lot of those are actually just wrapping Helm libraries and using Helm behind the scenes to do that work, which I think is quite cool, because it handles a lot of upgrade experience type stuff that you don't have to do yourself necessarily. But yeah, I figured that was possibly a good first step.
That's how we do install Agones on cluster. On our side, we have a control plane that uses Helm libraries to install Agones on Kubernetes cluster as well. The downside to that, I would say, is if installation fails or times out, it's hard to pick up again where it was with an operator and the reconciliation loop. I mean, we can patch stuff and fix it, and then it will end up installing.
Find it fails often?
It's basically timeout when it does, but
oh, interesting.
Because you need to install multiple resources, and if you're using an operator, it's a single CRD, so they have less back and forth between your tool and the cluster, basically. So.
Gotcha.
So Eric, back to like the user journeys Mark was talking about, it sounds like the one where you're seeing some friction is installation. Are you also dealing with upgrades in a similar way, or is it mainly installation where you think an operator would be helpful?
At the moment, we are doing the blue-green things, but we're looking at having in place upgrade at some point because, we're dealing with a high number of clusters. Let's say we will be anyway.
Yeah. What was I gonna say? I would definitely also love to, like, if you're getting like regular timeouts on Helm installs, I'd love to see like all the steps that you're doing to do that and see if we can replicate that in some way. Maybe there's a docs fix, or maybe we can, like, if switching tooling or something. I don't know what the right answer is. I'd love to look into that.
So Mark, did we ever look into like having the two versions of Agones in the same cluster? I know there are some complications, but I mean,
no. I think the biggest issue is actually CRDs more than anything else. Yeah, that terrifies me.
Because if I build like instance of that, I'm going to control them, try to control them, I manage them, right? Yeah, it would be harder to tell who's going to manage which one.
Also, how frequently customers of Agones upgrade their clusters? Is it like with every version?
Kubernetes version, right? Or the Agones version?
Agones version.
Okay.
So we have a release every 4 weeks. So we kind of we try to keep up to date, depending like when the release candidate goes final.
So Stephen, you guys just the latest.
So you usually time it with your gaming.
It sounds like you guys pick the latest Agones, and if you're releasing every 4 weeks, it's probably like sometimes you pick up the latest one right away, and sometimes you might skip one because of the 4 to 6 overlap.
Yes,
right?
yeah, that's right.
Alex, do you want to cover your items?
Yeah, there is a problem when we have wrong bot template spec, and then it becomes infinitely creating new game servers, and it realizes that it cannot create bot for game servers, and it delete unhealthy game server, and then do this again. And an idea behind this ticket, can we add some kind of feature gate or to have exponential backoff on this creating new game servers? I mean, for example, the issue was that a normal fleet could not be handled well when we have this like unhealthy fleet. And I wait for 1 day, and after 24 hours, it was like 1 million of game server create events, and it's do this game server create in the same pace. Possibly we can slow down it, for example. An alpha feature or like this.
Can I ask a question about this? I'm just bringing a note in here too. When you say the pod template spec is invalid, if the pod spec fails validation, the game server should move into error state, right? Which is like a catastrophic don't do anything. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
If I mess up, like the spec is valid in the, like it passes validation, but I've done something like put in the wrong image, so it's erroring out and the pod's crashing.
For example, some rarely used DNS, for example, DNS field or other fields, it is not possible to validate. And I think it goes not into error state, but in unhealthy state, and it becomes creating more and more these unhealthy game servers. So probably we can count like how many healthy game servers, or is there, if there is no ready game servers, why should we create more at the same pace?
So I'm wondering if there, because where is it? Where's the code I'm thinking of? Like somebody actually did a really good job here. Is there a way we can catch this type of thing better and move a game server to an error state, which then actually like reports out the error and exposes that up better? Is there a way we can do that?
There is an event is generated for this with a validation error from Kubernetes. There is an event only, but then we keep creating.
Okay, so I'm trying to also remember if the game server, does the game server in the situation you're describing, does the game server go into an error state?
Probably some of them goes into shutdown. Let me check. Do you mean that if we go to an error state, we shouldn't create new one? Or?
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm also driving at. Like if the game server goes into error, then maybe we actually just don't, like we don't, on a fleet, we don't shut that down. We don't get rid of it.
Yeah, that's right. Probably.
Alice, this only happens on fleets and game server sets, right? If you create a bare game server, you don't get the infinite behavior, correct? Because nothing is there's no higher level control trying to restart it, right?
Yeah. So actually, currently it's restarted automatically, and this is the reason. And for example, you cannot get events, or even in simple UDP for some reason. I'm not sure why. It took more than 30 seconds to connect, and then for other normal fleet. So I described some various bad scenarios which could happen. So I can replicate it. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. What was I going to say? Here we go. That's what I was looking for. I'm trying to find the move to error stuff. Here we go. Yeah. That's what I'm looking at. There's this block. Here we go. I'm going to link to that block in a ticket. I'm just adding a note to the ticket.
Thank you.
I just linked to, so I think that makes sense. I think if we are moving a game server to error, then we probably shouldn't restart it, because that is meant to be like a catastrophic state. Like something horrible has gone wrong and it's not going to recover. So we should probably actually just leave that alone so people can see it. I think that's a reasonable bug fix, and would make things good for people.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
No, that's it then. For by the way, there was one pull request, so probably we cannot merge it. It's with pod template. Daniel, do you have any ideas?
Yeah. I did some research on this pod template validation using Kubernetes package and stuff. I have the pull request in a draft state because I'm not sure if that's the direction that you folks want to follow, because it changed quite a lot in terms of dependencies and stuff. It's the 1578, the number of the PR. So basically what it's tackling here is that if during the deployment of a fleet, the pod template is invalid, we can use the validation package from Kubernetes to validate the whole pod spec. So basically, you can check every single field that could be presented in the pod template. And in case this is not valid, we could just return back to the, I don't know, maybe the controller saying that this is not the valid template or whatever. So this fleet would never be created, actually. But as you can see, that brings quite a lot of the extra dependencies, and I'm not sure if that's the right way. The PR is not full yet. It's not completed yet. I'm just demonstrating how that could be done. But I think that the validate function could be part of the admission controller, maybe, just an idea. Yeah, so basically, I spent some of this time figuring out how Kubernetes dependencies could be added to this project, and there is some changes in the Go mod file as well. But basically, I succeeded implementing the validation, so lots of validations and stuff that could be added. But again, I'm just waiting for feedback.
What's the replace block in the Go mod? Just out of curiosity, like.
So then you are just telling Go mod that instead of using the default package or the latest version, that it should lock on the specific version. For example, let me just.
I'm just wondering why that over just the normal Go mod inline stuff.
Yeah, because for example, if you have on the line 15, if you have Kubernetes 1.15 dependency, you might need very specific K8s metrics. And if you do not use the replace, the Go mod will try to bring the latest version from the Kubernetes repo, which not kind of doesn't match the Kubernetes 1.15, and it breaks the whole thing completely. So that's why we need the replace block.
You couldn't put that in the require block?
I was pretty much following what the Kubernetes community was suggesting on some posts, and I did not add it to the main require block.
I mean, we're already bringing in client Go and a bunch of other stuff, so everything should be 1.5. Like it should already be some of this stuff.
Yeah, there are a couple that look like they're duplicated in both blocks, like kates.io/API pointing to 0.15.11 is on line 45 and on line 55 in the PR.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to try doing like the standard Go mod, like go get for the particular version of the things that you need, and then when you're done, do a Go mod tidy and like see what's actually left. But I mean, it's a minor thing. I was just more curious.
I can try it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's a minor thing.
But the big win here is that then we are able to test the pod template using the same way that kubectl works or any other Kubernetes stuff works.
I guess the only question I have is there concern that there are, like, if somebody takes this version, wants to run it on a unsupported version, and they want to use a pod feature that is new in that version, suddenly it probably won't validate that new thing in that pod. I guess we don't really care because we only support a given version at any point in time. That's my only thought. Outside of that, I think this is awesome.
You are saying that if someone tries to deploy a pod template for 1.17 and we are using, I think the package will handle what the fields are present in the very specific version, if that makes sense. So because the package is tied to the Kubernetes version. So if that field was not present in 1.15, it would just be ignored.
Yeah.
Because looking at the source code from the Kubernetes code base, it's clearly which kind of resources and fields they are validating. It's pretty much everything. Yeah, I put on the PR all the list that they validate.
Yeah, the only problem is that it uses 0.0.0 and show without this replace it would not be used. And possibly we need some kind of proof. I saw some legit on Kubernetes was mostly commented on this topic. Probably we should approve this from them, because really can break some Gomoto in the future. At least I think we should have a proof from Legit or someone. Is it allowed to do? Or we can copy some parts of some validations.
Yeah, when I was investigating this issue, I saw many different people doing pretty much the same with the replace block from different sort of projects. And I haven't seen anyone from Kubernetes complaining about using the version or the package straight from the Kubernetes. What they say is that it's not suggested to use these packages externally. They were pretty much conceived for internal use. But in terms of copyrights or something like that, I don't know exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at so much stuff that's, I mean, what do we actually use in here? We're using the Kubernetes package API cores validation. Yeah, I wonder. We can. I mean, look. I think. What was I going to say? I think we can work on tidying that up, and like that's fine. I think that's a solvable problem. This is cool. I'd like to. I think probably also like it would be good to do this at the fleet level as well as the like at all the levels, so to speak, or probably actually more at the fleet and game server, because if I create a fleet and then it validates at that level before it starts game servers, that would be awesome.
Yeah. Just one final thing that I saw from the whole Agones source code is that doesn't matter if this method is originated from fleet or game set, it's always going to be called the game server validate function. So it doesn't matter if we are calling from fleet or game set. So the game server struct is validating itself.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
All right.
The other thought I had, it probably makes sense to, I would say, make this an alpha feature with a feature gate, just because I don't want to put out a thing where suddenly people can't roll out their versions anymore because something validates and doesn't work. But outside of that,
what I was trying to cover during this PR is that
Just see how it works.
I was adding the apply default. So in case folks are not providing at least the minimal spec, Agones is adding at least the minimum required fields for the validation to pass. So yeah. So I figured out which are the fields that required for the validation to pass the minimum state.
Yep.
And if it's not part of the manifest, we can just apply defaults.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty much it. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Do you want me to? No, that sounds good. Awesome.
Yeah, I will post the link in from the Slack I found, but it is not working right now. Okay, so.
All right.
Yeah, but actually, I can see this. Yeah. Okay. Probably we can use it somehow.
This is cool.
Steven, I think you were next.
I have one quick suggestion for your PR, Daniel. If you could squash your commits into like one commit of dependencies and one commit of the things you actually want people to take a really close look at, it'd be a lot easier to review than either having 124 files where I have to figure out what's vendored automatically, what I should look at, or having 14 commits as you were sort of working through the process.
That's for sure. I was just experimenting, but yeah, thanks for the feedback. I'm doing that.
Cool, thanks.
Okay.
Steven, you had stuff.
Yeah, some of this came out of the Slack channel, but it seemed like there were ourselves as well. There are multiple ways to allocate a game server. But actually, looking at the documentation, there's I guess a preferred way, which is the game server allocation to create that resource. But perhaps there is some clarification on why we can do it multiple ways, and is there a downside to any way? And also, perhaps as a follow-up, should we expand on the documentation around this?
I can. Oh yeah, Mark, do you want to talk?
Go ahead. Yeah, either or.
So one of the ways through the API's Kubernetes API server extension, and that's the original way. It basically uses the Agones controller, which is on just one pod, to do allocation, meaning that data plane and control plane is mixed into the one solution. There is an Agones allocator service, which basically introducing a service which scales separate from the control. That's basically a data plane for allocation. And the API is stable, so we can document and clarify if, for example, you need to allocate from external to the cluster, or if you want to scale up when you have higher traffic for allocating game servers, then the allocator service is the preferred solution. Sorry, I'm on the daycare, so sorry for the background noise. If you have your matchmaker, for example, on the same cluster, and your solution doesn't need to scale up for allocating game servers, then basically you can use the API extension server on the same cluster.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is like the logic behind game server allocation CRD and the logic behind the gRPC endpoint are exactly the same. So that's totally fine. It's just a question of which one you want to use. There's still the SDK allocate if you need that for specifically allocating a specific game server. That's not going anywhere. I do, yeah. And to that thread on Slack, like I want to get rid of that Go sample that's in the, I think it's in the quick start even of like writing your own allocation endpoint. I think it's just confusing people.
And it's deprecated, right?
Yeah. There's some weird stuff in it. Yeah, if you need a service, we have one for you. So if you want to have like a gRPC or actually a gRPC endpoint, which I think we were talking about making a REST endpoint as well at some point. So if you need a service, we have one. So you can use that. If you want to use the CRD, that's also totally fine. And if you need the SDK, that's cool. But yeah, we can put some more words around that. Does that sort of answer your question, though, Steve?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I think. And in fact, what we're doing currently, we are allocating a specific game server, but we don't actually need to. Any of the ready game servers would work, and could that? I guess potentially that could cause some auto scaling difficulties, or
Yeah, so we cover some of that in the there's a doc that talks about like scheduling and like that kind of stuff, and like that's why we talk about preferred. From an Agones point of view, we will always prefer it if you use our allocation service, so either the gRPC endpoint or the game server allocation CRD, because we do a lot of work to pack stuff together, and it's going to do it like you're not going to have that Swiss cheese problem nearly as much because we control that. So we recommend that, but if that pattern doesn't work for you for whatever reason, then that SDK allocate is always going to be available.
Okay, yeah, that's really useful. I think as well, like it's clear how to use the SDKs and on the game server side. I guess it's when it's around this from the matchmaker. I mean, the other one for us is like listing the game servers, and I think there is some information about that as well. But perhaps we could add more value by thinking like, what can we provide on the matchmaker side from outside?
Do you have a need to list game servers per, like if you have multiple clusters, like across clusters?
No, in our case, I guess we might have multiple games running, and they don't end. The games never end, so we want to place players onto a particular ready server.
Right.
But even there, really, we just want to prioritize for scheduling purposes. In our case, we're prioritizing the newest one, but that might not be right.
Yep.
So maybe we want to say, give me a ready game server, or give me 3 ready game servers, prioritized by some metric.
This also sounds like it leads into some of the stuff we've discussed in tickets around how do we like player tracking leads into this, but like how like if you were like, I want a game server that has room for 3 people, and then we'll do the prioritization for you so that we pack things as tightly as possible. Would that sort of solve the problem in a different way?
Yes, yeah, definitely. And actually, to that point, we are tracking how many players are in a game server.
Yeah.
And we have labels to say when it's unavailable or available and things like that. So there's an extra layer.
Yeah. The other thing I'll point out is as another potential idea is like Daniel's project, which is like pushing. We literally put that on the Agones project, which is pushing game server events into PubSub. So you could actually have a centralized place. So you can use PubSub to track what game servers you have and what data they have on them from your matchmaker by tracking your PubSub events, which is, I think, kind of awesome, actually. So Daniel, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, because it's awesome.
I just want to add one extra thing, that another project I've been working recently using that same PubSub strategy, but it's about exposing all the game servers via a REST API. And I can also post the link on the chat.
Oh, cool.
It's really early stages, but it's basically using the broadcaster core functionalities and exposing game servers, fields or states, everything that you can add to like in a more RESTful way. So basically you can consume these endpoints using any sort of REST client. Yeah, it's really early stages, but it's quite functional right now. So it's basically listening to events from Agones controller, or actually Kubernetes API, and pushing to a broadcaster which is implementing the HTTP backend. But that could kind of help on this finding servers, states via labels. And in future, I'm planning to add the GraphQL endpoint, so folks could filter and do whatever they want.
Fancy.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Mark, I wanted to mention that for the counter, for session counters that you're working on right now, I think at one point Matchmaker needs to know how many game players is on each session, and based on that allocate. So, do you think this listing of game servers would be useful for allocating?
Possibly. What I think in my ideal world, and it won't fit for all scenarios, I'd like to see the allocation system have enough flexibility to handle a lot of different matchmaking scenarios, such that you don't need to list game servers across all the things. You just assume that Agones is going to do the right thing for you. That's not there yet. So this is a nice feature. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like to just be like, give me a game server with these requirements because I have this type of game, and it just goes, here's the best one for your scenario. that being said, in the short term, this is also useful and not a bad thing. Pune, were you thinking like should we like pull this into core or something? Was that sort of your thought?
I was thinking whether this is a user scenario that we want to cover, or we have thought about that, like to solve it through either listing. Sorry about the background.
Yeah, you're fine.
Through listing or like broadcasting, as Daniel was explaining, or other sort of things. But along with what Stephen just said, it would be nice to have documentation and recommendation on how to basically, if you want to allocate from a certain game servers, how to do that.
Yeah. Technically, you could also actually do this through the game server allocation using filters. If you wanted to be like this specific one, you just stick a unique label on it. It's not like ideal, but it would work. But yeah, that's a good thought. Oop, 5 minutes left. Oh my god. I'll drop an extra thought. We do have a section in the Agones docs called third-party libraries and tools. So if anyone who's watching this or is here who has third-party tools, because there are a few on GitHub, I've done searches, please feel free to add them there. I'm going to not put other people's tools on there because I think if you want to put your tool on there, I want your approval. Oh my god, we've had a lot to talk about today. I'm gonna. Are we done with this topic?
I was gonna say there's like a few things left on the agenda, so fight it out for what.
I'm gonna skip mine. I will cede the floor to Pune, who wants to talk about it. I think your stuff is more important than mine.
So I had this proposal to actually disable MTLS authentication that is built in with Agones allocator service. That's partially to enable scenarios like ingress, that it supports the TLS authentication and easier integration with cloud solutions like ingress in the cloud. So my proposal is to provide a flag to enable disable MTLS. And then provide the samples like an ingress and how you can actually use that to set up your, with node port, set up your ingress allocation.
The only part I didn't understand, and I put a comment on it, and I think I'm just being a little thick. How does the cross-cluster communication still work with the SSL cert stuff? Like if I turn off MTLS, is there still going to be like a TLS cert version that's worked that does the cross cluster bit, but a non-encrypted version that's exposed? Like that's the bit that confused me. Outside of that, I think this is a good idea.
I think, for example, ingress can support multiple authentication approaches. So if you want to set up your multi-cluster allocation, your TLS, you should basically provide an MTLS authentication from the ingress and set up your certificates so that the clusters can talk to each other. But from your matchmaker perspective, if you want to use a different authentication solution, then you can basically use a different authentication provided by ingress.
Okay. So what was I going to say? So basically, if you turn off MTLS, then it's on you to sort out how you want to do your encryption between clusters or not have it at all. That's entirely up to you. But if you do turn it on, then like we have steps for how to set up all that stuff. Okay, got it.
Right. This is basically for more complicated scenarios that you want to control your own traffic.
Yep.
So the original goal for the allocator service to simplify as much as possible so that with Agones installations actually get installed. But I think it would be valuable. And
yep.
I don't know if this is actually a requirement by the customers, but it would be valuable to actually being able to disable it and then handle the traffic yourself.
Right. And then you could use like a managed service or something if you wanted to use that. That makes sense to me. Cool. Sweet. I guess the only thought I have on that is it would probably be good to specify whether MTLS is on or not and what service type you want. But outside of that, I don't know how anyone else feels. I'll stop talking.
So what do you mean by service type also being provided or specified?
Oh, so you could say do this without MTLS, but do it as a load balancer. Do it as no on or off with MTLS, but do it as a node port. So you have control over that as how it's exposed in the cluster. I don't know if we have already.
This is already there.
There you go. Yeah, sweet.
Through Helm.
then I have no thoughts.
It might be harder to cover all the different options. I think, yeah, there might be different combinations or specifications everybody can implement and manage it. But at least it's not enforced to use the certs to authenticate. Or
One minute left. Do we have anything else? I mean, I'm sure if we go over a minute, it's not the end of the
Yeah,
world.
probably regarding my PR, which is about adding one more pipeline end-to-end test into a pipeline. It adds 4 minutes. I mean, into every cloud build. And currently, we don't test on stable. We test on feature gates enabled, which is not so good. And I mean, probably we can add this additional 4 minutes in cloud build and later do it in pro job, or how in what priority we would do this. Robert, can you explain how Prof can help with this? Or
yeah, I mean, the idea with Prow is that we'd be able to run multiple things in parallel, right? You can add your webhook, so it'll do multiple tests on a PR or multiple things after PRs are submitted. We haven't quite gotten it hooked up, and I think what Mark was saying is like once we get one thing in Prow and we have sort of an example of what it looks like, it'll probably be really easy to add more. We don't have that sort of first like Trailblazer config in there to get the first like test up and running. And so I think that's, if you've got stuff working on cloud build and we want it in right away, that's going to be the quickest way to get it in, even if it adds a little bit of extra time because we have to do things serially. I would love to get the Prow stuff set up, and it's just a matter of time and priorities, right? And those things are hard to come by these days.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the other thought with this is if we wanted to, we could spin up another cluster and run them in parallel rather than running them in serial.
Yeah, that also should work.
How long's our build time now? It's like 15 minutes. This would make it like 20. That's minorly terrifying.
Yeah.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Well, unless anybody has anything else, we can wrap this one up, and then we'll meet again next month and chat on the Slacks and everything else.
Yep.
Sound good? All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Really useful.
Thanks.
Bye.